Chapter 351, Xianxia's death. When Han Li heard this, he faintly smiled and immediately explained, "Young Miss Xin has misunderstood. This individual by my side isn't a living person. He's just a corpse that I had refined. Once young Miss Xin inspects him with her spiritual sense, it will be made clear." After Han Li said this, he took the initiative to stop and wait for Xinruyan to recognize Crooked Soul as a Xianxia. A short moment later, Xinruyan responded, "Ah, I was mistaken. Senior Han, please come in." Xinruyan's tone was apologetic, but Han Li paid it no mind, flying forward on his divine wind boat with a smile. Just as Han Li flew forward, the scene before him brightened as the bamboo rooms that he had seen on his previous trip appeared once more. Two women were standing in front of the bamboo rooms, Xinruyan and her pretty maid. While both were wearing pure white clothes, Xinruyan's style of dress left Han Li stunned. Widow Xin pay her respects to Senior Han. When Xinruyan saw Han Li arrive, she stepped forward and gracefully greeted him. However, her haggard appearance raised Han Li's suspicions. "There is no need for young lady Xin to be so courteous." Han Li continued on with a few polite niceties. At this moment, the young maid behind Xinruyan stepped forward and greeted Han Li. Han Li inattentively nodded his head in response. It was obvious that Xinruyan didn't intend to stand there and have a long chat with Han Li. With a forced smile, she led Han Li to one of the larger bamboo rooms. Upon entering the room, Han Li was left dumbstruck. Right beside the door, there was a table with a pitch-black memorial tablet with the words "Husband Xianxia" carved into it in large characters. There was a small incense burner in front of the memorial tablet with several lit incense sticks slowly releasing smoke. Having seen this, how could Han Li not know what had happened? Han Li was beyond surprised to find that Xianxia had actually passed away. After he had recovered from his shock, he lightly sighed and took the initiative to approach the table. After taking out an incense stick, lighting it, and paying his respects, he placed it inside the incense burner. "Young lady Xin, how did this happen?" After he finished paying his respects, Han Li turned his head and asked in a soft voice, "There is much to say. How about I give Senior Han a proper explanation in another room?" Xinruyan said with a feeble voice as the corner of her eyes reddened. As of now, Xinruyan was no longer the intelligent and shrewd woman he remembered. He only saw a pitiful young woman. In response, Han Li silently nodded his head. Xinruyan then led Han Li to a neighboring room and sat down. The young maid quickly steeped a pot of tea for Han Li and poured him a cup. Han Li lightly sipped the fragrant tea before setting down the cup and speaking with a solemn voice. "I truly didn't expect that after several months, fellow Daoist would encounter mishaps. The heavens truly enjoy toying with men. Ah yes, when did fellow Daoist and young lady Xin marry? Had I known about it, I definitely would have sent a gift." Xinruyan bitterly smiled in response. Without waiting for her to speak, her maid answered on her behalf. "Senior, my clan's young madam decided to voluntarily live as young Master Chi's widow after his death." Han Li was left utterly shocked and couldn't help but gaze at Xinruyan in astonishment. "Xiao Mai speaks truly. I have decided to observe widowhood on young Master Chi's behalf." Xinruyan confirmed this, slowly nodding her head in response to Han Li's gaze of astonishment. Han Li was left speechless. This one has received life-saving kindness from young Master Chi on numerous occasions, a debt that can't possibly be paid back. If young Master Chi were still alive, it would only be a matter of time before I married him. Now, I am merely doing what I should. As she calmly said this, Xinruyan reached out with her flawless hand and lightly pulled away a strand of her beautiful hair that laid against her forehead. Han Li naturally had nothing suitable to say in response. Xinruyan then continued, detachedly giving Han Li an explanation of how Xianxia's death came to be. Due to Han Li's exhortations, Xianxia and Xinruyan were very careful and rarely went outside after he left. Nevertheless, after 2 months, Xinruyan lacked some direly needed materials to research the spell formation and had no choice but to make a trip to a nearby market city. This matter had unexpectedly been found out by Xianxia. As someone who was wholeheartedly infatuated with Xinruyan, he offered to make the trip for her. However, They couldn't possibly have known that the cultivators Han Li had slaughtered to save Xin Ruyan were actually juniors from one of the greatest cultivation clans of the state of Yuanwu, the Fu clan. As many juniors of their lineage had disappeared without reason, the Fu clan naturally pursued the matter to the finest thread. As a result, a few Fu clan cultivators wandering nearby had come across Xianxia, who had just recently emerged. Had Xianxia been shrewd or experienced enough, he would have been able to deal with any situation that arose. But unfortunately, he was far too naive and inexperienced. After only being asked a few questions related to the disappearance, he lost himself to panic and aroused the suspicions of the Fu clan members. They immediately wanted to arrest him and bring him back for interrogation. Naturally, Xianxia didn't wait for himself to be captured. With the formidable magic tools he had on hand, he forcibly escaped from the Fu clan Qi condensation cultivators and fled back to his residence. As such, Xianxia had doomed himself to calamity. The Fu clan cultivators were able to quickly track him back to his residence. However, the great formation he had laid down managed to severely injure or kill over 10 of their cultivators. In their fury, the Fu clan had actually dispatched a core formation expert. After half a day of fierce attacks, they were able to forcibly break through his great formation. However, no one had expected that Xianxia would hastily lay down an even more ferocious illusion formation behind his first formation while the tide was against him. He managed to trap the core formation cultivator within, giving him the opportunity to escape. Naturally, the other Fu clan cultivators weren't going to let him go so easily. Although Xianxia was able to break through their siege by using the remnants of his formation spell, he sustained mortal wounds in the process, and his loyal shopkeeper had died as well. Shortly after arriving at Xin Ruyan's residence, Xianxia took his last breath. The Fu clan was unaware of this and resentfully searched for Xianxia at every location. In addition, they had dispatched experts to monitor his residence. In this case, it was the old man and the youth from the Fu clan that Han Li had killed. After hearing Xin Ruyan's account, Han Li felt a slight twinge of sadness. Although Han Li wasn't a close friend with Xianxia by any means, he still felt that he was a pretty decent person. To think that he would die so young, the world was truly a fickle place. Senior Han must have come here for the ancient transportation formation. Having finished her account, Xin Ruyan suddenly mentioned this. Oh, that matter isn't urgent. Han Li spoke with embarrassment. After all, her husband had just died. This was not the appropriate time to inquire about such matters. I've just about restored the transportation formation. It should be finished in a month. Xin Ruyan continued, not seeming to mind Han Li's embarrassment. Really? Han Li couldn't help but grow excited and revealed a somewhat happy expression. Yes, really. Not only will I restore the transportation formation, but I also have 2 things to give to Senior Han. Xin Ruyan calmly said, taking 2 jade boxes out of her storage pouch and setting them on the table. What's this? Han Li blankly stared on in surprise. One of the boxes contains Xianxia's insights, my husband's collection of tool refinement records. The other box contains a large amount of books on the Tao of formation spells and my expertise in formation spells. I hope that Senior Han will accept these items. Xin Ruyan faintly said. Han Li's heart trembled. After taking a look at the 2 jade boxes, he looked at Xin Ruyan with a calm expression and asked, What do you want, young lady Xin? Why do you want to give such precious items to me? Please, speak bluntly. Han Li's voice held a trace of coldness. I am giving these items as a gift to Senior Han in return for a promise. Xin Ruyan didn't avoid Han Li's gaze, revealing an unwavering expression. This promise being? Although Han Li could faintly guess what she wanted, he still asked this with a heavy tone. If Senior Han were to one day enter core formation, I wish for Senior Han to thoroughly exterminate the Fu clan from the state of Yuanwu on my and Xianxia's behalf. Xin Ruyan's voice was as cold as ice frozen for countless years. When Han Li heard this, the resentment contained within her words caused even his heart to tremble. Chapter 352. Promise Han Li didn't immediately refuse or agree. Instead, he tightly wrinkled his brow and lowered his head in silence, weighing the potential gains and losses. Truth be told, Han Li was unwilling to agree. As of current, Han Li held little interest in spell formation and tool refinement techniques. Only after he successfully reached core formation would he have the time to research such things. In addition, he was unwilling to provoke a huge cultivator clan for no reason, not to mention that he didn't have the ability to do so. I understand that this request is overreaching, but Ruian truly doesn't have any other way. Xin Ruian gave a bleak smile with a pale complexion. Elder brother Qi's death by the Fu clan was because of the incident that I brought about. If I do not avenge my husband, then I wouldn't have the face to see him after I die. I would prefer to go to hell. Xin Ruian softly whispered with a pleading tone. When Han Li heard her say die, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as he suddenly thought of something. He suddenly raised his head, taking a careful look at Xin Ruian's complexion and leaving Xin Ruian stunned in response. There is something amiss with your complexion. Let me see your veins. Han Li spoke in an irrefutable tone, greatly surprising Xin Ruian. A queer glint flashed from her eyes. After a moment of hesitation, she obediently handed Han Li her flawless wrist. Han Li impolitely brought 2 fingers to her wrist and poured a strand of spiritual qi into her body. A long while later, Han Li's expression became unsightly. Are you aware that your blood vessels have completely withered away? If this is not addressed, you will die within 2 years. Han Li coldly said after withdrawing his hand. Xin Ruian faintly smiled in response to Han Li's assertion. Of course I know this. How could I not know about my own body? My constitution is of the dragon's cry, a male body wrongly born as female. If someone with this constitution were to forcefully cultivate, their meridians would gradually wither away along with their lifespan. For me to have lived this long was by mere luck. Originally, I had hoped to find an ancient formula to cure this illness. However, I failed, merely wasting the many spiritual medicines that Elder Brother Qi had searched for in vain. Xin Ruian revealed an expression of self-mockery. Young madam. Xin Ruian's maid couldn't help but shout out with sadness from behind her. It's nothing, Xiao Mai. I am only going to see Elder Brother Qi a bit sooner. This is exactly what I desire. Xin Ruian unexpectedly consoled her maid with a peaceful expression. Han Li's expression grew soft and for some unknown reason, he truly felt pity toward her. But unfortunately, Han Li couldn't do anything about Xin Ruian's strange illness and could only watch on as her life and beauty withered away. Since Senior Han now knows of this matter, he should understand why I have acted in this manner. Although Senior is currently only a Foundation Establishment cultivator, you are the sole person familiar with Elder Brother Qi and me that has a chance of avenging him. I don't require Senior to swear an oath. I only want a promise, so that I may pass away with ease. Xin Ruian returned to her previously calm demeanor and nonchalantly mentioned the matter of vengeance again. Han Li stroked his nose with all his strength, finding himself in a rather difficult position. But after a moment of hard thought, he suddenly asked, what about those from fellow Daoist Qi's clan? Humph, the Qi clan? They are merely a common clan within the state of Yuanwu. How could they dare to offend the Fu clan? Besides, Elder Brother Qi was only an external branch disciple driven out from the sect. They couldn't be less concerned. As for me, I've learned everything from a nameless formation spell grandmaster. He was a rogue cultivator that had long since passed away. Xin Ruian understood what Han Li meant and explained her and Qi Yunxiao's background to Han Li in a soft voice. Han Li's mind grew quiet. He had truly thought that this woman had an alternative. Fine. I can give young Lady Xin this promise. However, I will only act when I possess the ability to do so. If such an opportunity does not appear in my lifetime, will you regret it? After pondering for a long while, Han Li took a deep breath and spoke in a heavy voice. That will be enough. So long as you can give me hope, it will do. Let me thank Senior Han in advance. Xin Ruian couldn't help but widely smile in response, suddenly appearing daintily beautiful. Han Li was stunned as he took in her beauty. But soon after, he shook his head and bluntly swiped his sleeve across the table, causing 2 jade boxes to disappear without a trace into his storage pouch. Since you require another month to restore the transportation formation, then I will have to trouble young Lady Xin in a month's time. I will now be taking my leave. Han Li spoke unhurriedly as he stood up. With this gap of time available, he had quite a few matters to attend to. This one pays Xianxia her respects. Xin Ruian said respectfully without further urging Han Li to stay. As a result, Han Li flew to the Heavenly Star Sex Market City with Crooked Soul in tow. After a day, Han Li arrived in the vicinity of the market city. After he took out a cloak from his storage pouch and covered his face, he entered the market city with a swagger, bringing Crooked Soul along with him. As Han Li walked through the streets of the market city, he was astonished to find so many cultivators trading and bustling about. There were several times as many cultivators compared to the last time he came here. In addition to the hurried atmosphere, there were also a few rarely seen Foundation establishment cultivators within the city. After pondering for a moment, Han Li's eyes flashed with thoughtfulness. But soon after, he tossed the matter to the back of his mind and went straight toward that magic tool store that helped him craft his magic tools on his previous trip. He had a few materials that could be refined into useful magic tools, thereby increasing his own strength. That magic tool store still looked exactly the same as before. Even its arrogant signboard was completely the same. Han Li entered the store with a faint smile. The circumstances within the store caused Han Li's brow to slightly furrow. The tiny store actually had 6 people standing and sitting around. When they saw Han Li enter, they couldn't help but glance at him. When Han Li saw them, he swept his cold gaze past them without a trace of politeness. In response, they immediately lowered their heads. As Qi condensation cultivators, they naturally wouldn't dare to offend Han Li, a senior Foundation establishment cultivator. But a man with a fiendish appearance sitting in a chair looked at Han Li without the slightest hint of fear. Although he was only in early Foundation establishment, he didn't turn his gaze away. Han Li didn't pay him any mind and walked over to the 2 store employees that were chatting. "Is store owner Shu here?" Han Li calmly asked the burly man called Da He. "Senior, who?" The burly man revealed an expression of doubt. Han Li sighed and took out the black dragon claws, revealing them to him. He was assisting at the side as this magic tool was created. There was no way he wouldn't have recognized it. So it turned out to be Senior. This one will call Master out. The burly man's eyes brightened, recognizing the black dragon claws as Han Li had expected. He immediately apologized with a wide grin and hastily ran to the back courtyard. Seeing that Han Li was the store owner's acquaintance, the others couldn't help but look at each other in shock. However, nobody dared to untactfully bother Han Li. Not long after, the fully white-haired shop owner welcomed Han Li with a beaming smile. On his last trip, Han Li left him with a significant amount of rare materials. It was only natural for the old man to give him such a warm welcome. "This small old man is honored to have Senior come to my shop once more. Does Senior wish to refine more magic tools?" After exchanging a few pleasantries, Old Man Shu impatiently asked with a face full of anticipation. Han Li faintly smiled and deliberately swept his gaze past the other cultivators in the room. "How foolish of me!" Shop owner Shu exclaimed, immediately understanding what Han Li had meant. He then invited Han Li to the rear courtyard and excitedly led the way. The others didn't dare to say anything, except for the large, fiendish man who snorted with dissatisfaction. He was greatly angered at how differently he was treated compared to Han Li, as he was also a Foundation establishment cultivator who had even sought out this tool refinement store. In response to the large man's snort, Han Li shot an ice-cold glance at him. Han Li had killed no small number of cultivators and unconsciously carried a murderous aura as a result. That single glance immediately caused the large man to feel as if his entire body had turned to ice, and he couldn't help but reveal an expression of terror. Having seen the large man's expression had changed, Han Li didn't pay him any further attention and brought Crooked Soul along with him to the rear courtyard. At that moment, Da He cleverly stepped forward and apologized to the others, casually giving them an excuse in an attempt to placate their discontent. Did Senior bring back more materials? When Han Li and Crooked Soul entered the rear courtyard, shop owner Shu glanced at Crooked Soul with slight surprise before impatiently asking Han Li. Chapter 353. The Stardust Pavilion. Han Li wore a slight smile when he saw the old man's eagerness. He casually took out the materials-filled storage pouch and turned it upside down. A white light suddenly shone, and the materials Han Li obtained from the white spider and demon mantis poured out onto the ground. This is... The shop owner crouched over and gathered together the white spider's lower limbs, inspecting them with rapt attention. He revealed an expression of puzzlement. Although the old man was a tool refining expert, he didn't understand much about rare, strange insects. As a result, even if he were able to see that the materials were unordinary, he was still left baffled. Han Li smiled for a moment before giving him an explanation. Most of these materials came from the limbs and shell of a white spider. There are also the wings and forelimbs of a huge demon mantis. They were both grade 4 demonic beasts. As for the mantis, it was a peak grade 4 demonic beast and was exceptionally powerful. I hope that your esteemed self will be able to properly make use of these materials. I had to spend quite a bit of effort to obtain them. Materials obtained from grade 4 demonic beasts. The white-haired old man shouted in astonishment and immediately sank into ecstasy. Not to mention grade 4 demon beasts, even materials from grade 2 demon beasts were rarely seen. That's right, shop owner Shu. However, for this set of magic tools, I have a particular request for what is to be created. I will only allow you to work with them if you are able to fulfill my request. Payment will be handled the same as before. If there are any leftover materials, you may keep a portion of them to do with as you please. Han Li said calmly. Senior, please feel at ease. Regardless of the request, this small old man will comply. To be able to personally refine such top-grade materials, I didn't spend my life pursuing the Tao of tool refinement in vain. Shop owner Shu then picked up the mantis arms and caressed them with a fanatical gaze. Han Li was surprised to see him with such an expression, but his heart grew increasingly at ease. He spoke to the old man with a gentle tone. The magic tools that I request you refine are rather unusual. I wish for you to refine the spider legs into a set of offensive magic tools. As for the mantis. 2 hours later, Han Li and Crooked Soul left the tool refinement shop. He had come to an agreement with shop owner Shu after the shop owner inspected the materials. Several days later, the shop owner would finish his plans for the methods of their refinement. At that time, Han Li would return with the materials and they would officially start their refinement. But for now, Han Li had an opportunity to take a proper stroll around the market city. His suspicions were finally confirmed by an old man as he was browsing around. It turned out that news of the defeat of the state of Yu and their 2 allied countries had spread to the state of Yuanwu. Regardless of whether they were from a cultivator clan or unaffiliated, all of those in the state of Yuanwu felt both uncertainty and premonitions of hardship. Consequently, massive numbers of cultivators flocked to the market city. Many even brought along their rare treasures to trade for direly needed items, thereby increasing their strength to brave the upcoming catastrophe. Within a short few days, all the market cities in the state of Yuanwu began to spread news of precious magic tools, pills, and other such items. A great number of cultivators were instantly attracted, leading to great furor within the market cities. Naturally, Han Li couldn't let such a golden opportunity slip by him. With that in mind, Han Li began to stroll around the shops, taking a look in every direction. As he had expected, there were far more high-quality goods for sale. But much to Han Li's surprise, there were very few top-grade magic tools for sale. Still, it wasn't as if Han Li had any need for those common top-grade magic tools. After walking in nearly a full circle, Han Li had only bought a few uncommon medicinal ingredients that he hadn't seen before. There was nothing else of interest to him. He subsequently headed toward the heart of the market city, the Stardust Pavilion. Having traded in market cities several times, Han Li already knew that if he wanted to buy better goods, he would have to go to the larger, more imposing stores. Only they would have the power to acquire quality goods. Though the small vendors might actually possess a few decent items, they had nothing compared to the collection of a large store. Not long ago, he acquired many quality items from the Thousand Treasures Pavilion of the Yellow Maple Valley Market City. With that line of thought, Han Li brought Crooked Soul along to the Heavenly Star Sect Stardust Pavilion, a huge, 100-meter-tall building. Han Li was rendered speechless upon entering. This was because there were over 30 cultivators bustling about on the first floor's hall. They were all surrounding several display counters, talking with red-clothed store employees. Not a single person noticed Han Li. Han Li scratched the back of his head and absent-mindedly walked toward a display counter, looking around for the stairs to the second story. 3 Qi condensation cultivators stood beside the display counter. One of them was continuously waving a white formation flag while speaking to the store employee in a dissatisfied mumble. The Stardust Pavilion employee appeared to not mind at all. From the very start, he had been giving explanations with a wide smile on his face. However, when these cultivators saw Han Li and Crooked Soul approach them, they immediately grew silent. It was clear that they were very wary of unfamiliar cultivators. When the flag-holding cultivator saw Han Li approach, he hastily brought out several tens of spirit stones to give to the store employee before hastily flying off with his friend. Han Li gloomily gazed at them as they took off. He felt slightly at a loss. But just a moment later, the store employee politely addressed Han Li. "Senior, my sincerest apologies. As this is the first floor, I'm afraid there is nothing of interest here. If Senior truly wishes to find suitable items to purchase, then the floors above the third would be best. Those floors specialize in receiving high-class cultivators." Initially, Han Li was somewhat startled, but he soon recovered his usual bearings. He asked indifferently, "Could you give me an introduction to the floors of the Stardust Pavilion?" The employee appeared slightly surprised, but he respectfully agreed, "Of course. Since it's Senior's first time at our Stardust Pavilion, it's only natural that I introduce our store to you. Our Stardust Pavilion has a total of 9 floors. The first 7 are open to the public, and the last 2 are closed off to outsiders. The first 3 floors are for inferior Qi condensation cultivators. Floors 4 through to 6 are for high-grade cultivators such as yourself. As for floors 7 and higher, they are at the service of core formation cultivators." The employee quickly gave Han Li a general introduction to the store. Han Li nodded his head and then wordlessly walked straight toward the stairs to the second floor. The second and third floors were a bit smaller than the first, but the arrangement was obviously more luxurious. It seemed that the farther up he went, the more precious the items that were on sale. With that thought, Han Li quickly passed through floors 2 and 3, even directly passing through the 4th floor. He had originally thought to head straight toward the 6th floor, but a young, red-clothed servant blocked his way. According to the store rules, you must first gain the approval of the 5th floor shopkeeper before being allowed to proceed to the 6th floor. The elegant, young servant expressionlessly said. Although he was only a Qi condensation cultivator, he didn't fear Han Li, a foundation establishment cultivator, in the slightest. Han Li wrinkled his brow and headed toward the 5th floor's main hall instead of becoming angry. Although the main hall wasn't large, there were several young, pretty female servants waiting there. When Han Li walked in, a man and woman were having a relaxed discussion. The man had a common appearance and seemed to be about 35 years old. The woman appeared to be nearing 40 years old and had the grace of a noble woman. It could be seen that in her youth she was a rarely seen beauty. While the two were both foundation establishment cultivators, Han Li was surprised to see that the middle-aged woman was a late foundation establishment cultivator. "Fellow Daoist, do you require any assistance?" When the middle-aged woman saw Han Li enter, she turned her head and gave him an enchanting smile. She spoke with a melodious voice that soothed those who heard it. "I wish to purchase a few truly precious items. Do you have any such items? I don't care whether it is a magic tool, talisman, or anything else." Hearing that Han Li's tone was rather arrogant, the man glanced at Han Li with slight surprise. He. If fellow Daoist truly wishes to buy quality goods, then he has come to the right place. So long as you have the money to pay, we will definitely leave you satisfied. Although the middle-aged woman was no longer young, her laughter was just as charming as that of a young woman. But as it happens, this fellow Daoist also wishes to buy quality goods. Please wait for a bit, and I'll take out a few items for you to browse," the woman said with a beaming smile. She then turned her head and gave a command with a serious expression. "Violet Lotus, come and serve these 2 esteemed guests some tea." "Of course, madam," the maid standing behind the woman respectfully replied. As the middle-aged woman leisurely walked out, The maid poured a cup of tea for Han Li and the man who was originally here. Chapter 354. Madame Lan. Han Li and that man were seated on different sides of the square table. They took several glances at each other, but neither of them had any intention of talking. Cultivators who came here to do their shopping had no intentions of treading too closely to strangers, as it would only breed hostility. Despite this, the man still shot several curious glances at Crooked Soul, who had remained outside the hall by the staircase. Thanks to his perceptiveness, he had already made out Crooked Soul to be a refined corpse, but the spiritual chi fluctuations he felt from Crooked Soul's body left him quite baffled. After all, cultivate refined, iron-skinned corpses normally only had immense strength. It shouldn't be possible for them to possess magic power. The man strongly suppressed his desire to ask questions. Although Han Li was a mid-foundation establishment cultivator like himself, he was rather wary of him. After Han Li had sipped away most of the tea, the woman finally returned to the main hall. This time, she had two strong, robust men following behind her. These two men didn't possess any magic power and had rather stiff faces. They were unexpectedly two realistic-looking puppets. The puppets held a huge tray, wrapped in a bundle of silk cloth. It seemed that the shopkeeper intended on concealing the precious items within it. A strange expression flashed from Han Li's eyes. He had just used his spiritual sense to see through the red silk and find out what was underneath it. However, he hadn't expected that the unremarkable silk cloth would block him. In his surprise, he couldn't help but turn his head to look at the man beside him. He also appeared astonished. It was obvious he had done the same. The middle-aged woman approached Han Li and the man until she was a few steps away. She wordlessly smiled before she spoke. "I've already acquainted myself with you, fellow Daoist fan. Might I ask for your name, fellow Daoist?" "My surname is Lan. You two fellow Daoists may call me Madame Lan." The woman gave herself a well-practiced introduction. Naturally, Han Li couldn't awkwardly remain silent, so he reluctantly said, "My surname is Han." Afterwards, he said nothing further and displayed a cold demeanor, unwilling to speak further. Madame Lan didn't take this to heart. After all, a vast majority of cultivators that came here feigned indifference like Han Li. It was something she had long become accustomed to. As a result, she smiled slightly and beckoned to the puppets behind her. The well-chiseled puppets immediately walked forward. Afterwards, Madame Lan extended her flawless finger and lifted the red cloth cover, revealing the several items underneath. Han Li and the man surnamed Fan simultaneously gazed at the items on the tray, their eyes gleaming with rapt attention. A long sword, short blade, throwing dart, a ring, and a piece of jet-black armor were arranged in a line. From one glance at the sparkling shine each of these items radiated, one could tell that these were not common goods. Once the magic tools on the dish were clearly seen, Han Li and the man surnamed Fan had differing reactions. The cultivator named Fan intensely stared at the plate with a gaze containing a slight trace of exhilaration. But when Han Li glanced at them, he immediately turned his gaze away, revealing a lack of interest. This greatly surprised Madame Lan, causing her to pay closer attention to Han Li. This item is called the Cold Crystal Blade. It was refined using rare profound crystal and ice jade. Not only are its attacks powerful, it also possesses dark cold chi, capable of unknowingly decreasing the power of enemies in a chaotic battle. It truly is a quality item among top-grade magic tools. The woman calmly introduced the item after deftly grabbing the transparent, sparkling short blade from the tray and lifting it into the air. She then waved the magic tool in her hand, immediately releasing a breeze of icy chi. As soon as it appeared in the room, the chi condensation maids couldn't help but shiver. "Could Madame let this one take a look at that blade?" The man surnamed Fan looked at the magic tool with excitement. Madame Lan faintly smiled in response and handed over the blade without the slightest of hesitation. Afterwards, she took a hidden glance at Han Li. She only saw Han Li with an indifferent expression. He had merely lowered his head to look at the empty teacup in his hand. As he did not show the slightest interest in this magic tool, Madame Lan felt slightly disappointed. As he was playing around with the short blade in his hand, The man surnamed Fan spoke in a loud voice. All right, I want to buy this cold crystal blade. How many spirit stones will it cost? Although Madame Lan was somewhat surprised to hear this, she calmly asked, doesn't fellow Daoist Fan intend to look at the other magic tools? There is no need. This one naturally knows that the other items are certain to be better. However, this one is embarrassingly short of money. I reckon that this blade is the only one I can buy. So even if the other items are better, this one does not have the heart to see them. This way, I can avoid feeling envy. This cultivator Fan spoke rather honestly with a touch of humor. The beautiful Madame Lan raised her hand to conceal a faint smile. The woman quickly suppressed her smile and spoke methodically as usual. This cold crystal blade costs 800 spirit stones. Once fellow Daoist Fan hands over that amount, he may take the item and leave. Good. Could you take a look and check if this is the right amount of spirit stones? Cultivator Fan bluntly took out a storage pouch. In the blink of an eye, a pile of varied colored spirit stones poured out onto the table. Madame Lan effortlessly swept her gaze across the table. With the corners of her lips slightly raised, she said, how could I distrust you? There is no need to check. With that said, the woman took her storage pouch and absorbed the spirit stones on the table. Madame Lan's actions gave Cultivator Fan a very favorable impression. He then revealed an amicable expression before taking his leave. But when Han Li saw this, he inwardly laughed in ridicule despite his indifferent expression. What do you mean by there is no need to check? What was the spiritual sense enveloping the spirit stones supposed to be? Obviously, Madame Lan's spiritual sense is far stronger than common cultivators and was able to instantly count the number of spirit stones without anybody knowing. As such, she was able to deliberately say such a clever and convenient line. Han Li thought with an inward sneer. Madame Lan hadn't realized that her cheap trick had been seen through by Han Li. After she finished watching Cultivator Fan leave with a faint smile on her face, she turned her gaze upon Han Li once more. Fellow Daoist Han seems to hold no interest in these items. Could it be that these magic tools aren't worthy of fellow Daoist's notice? Madame Lan asked with a slight smile. It was quite strange. She clearly knew that the person before her had inferior cultivation to her own. But for some unknown reason, she felt a trace of strange danger from Han Li, causing her speech to unconsciously become more tactful towards him as she didn't dare to offend him. While the quality of these magic tools are quite decent, I am looking for magic tools that are a bit more exceptional. They must also be well suited to my techniques. Furthermore, not only am I looking for magic tools and talismans, I am also interested in rare items. Han Li replied serenely. Oh. If fellow Daoist Han had such requests, he should have said them sooner. This one had believed that fellow Daoist Han would have been satisfied with any kind of magic tool, the same as fellow Daoist Fan. Madame Lan couldn't help but giggle. She then continued speaking with great confidence. So long as fellow Daoist is able to pay the price, our Stardust Pavilion will provide all the items you desire. Han Li dryly laughed and directly answered with a question. Since Madame insists, I will bluntly mention them. Does your esteemed pavilion have any pill formulas useful to Foundation establishment cultivators for sale? Or any sets of magic tools? Naturally, the greater the number in a magic tool set, the better. The woman's face revealed slight emotion before immediately regaining her calm. Madame Lan stared at Han Li with her beautiful eyes before speaking deliberately. Fellow Daoist's requests are truly unusual. Were it half a month ago, I may have been left helpless. But now, my pavilion had acquired 2 such pill formulas and a set of high-quality magic tools. The prices of these items are truly great. They are not something that I am able to sell. Fellow Daoist will have to continue this conversation on the 6th floor. Han Li had anticipated what the woman would say and asked indifferently, then am I allowed to go up to the 6th floor? Madame Lan lightly brushed her hair before gently smiling. Of course you can. But in accordance to sect rules, I must first inspect fellow Daoist's qualifications. What qualifications? Han Li casually asked. It's very simple. It is whether or not fellow Daoist possesses 1,000 spirit stones or items of equivalent value. The woman stated with an earnest tone. Is this enough? Without any objections, Han Li took out the storage pouch that kept his spirit stones and tossed it toward the woman. Han Li's collection of spirit stones had reached 1,000 long ago. Now, he should be in possession of nearly 2,000 spirit stones. Madame Lan took the storage pouch and examined it with her spiritual sense. She then nodded her head and said, "Please follow me. I will personally accompany you to the 6th floor." When Han Li saw her walking towards the stairs, he silently followed after her. The young, red-clothed servant guarding the stairwell silently stepped to the side upon seeing Madame Lan approach. Han Li and Madame Lan then climbed to the 6th floor one after the other. Chapter 355, Red Thread Shadow Chaser Needles. To tell the truth, Han Li was quite curious about the 6th floor shopkeeper. The 5th floor shopkeeper was a late Foundation establishment cultivator. Could the 6th floor cultivator be a core formation expert? Han Li felt slightly excited. Then Han Li glanced at the young, 17-year-old woman that stood behind Madame Lan and was left dumbfounded. The young woman was dressed rather simply, and her beauty was merely above average. However, for this young mortal woman who was lacking even the slightest magic power to be the 6th floor shopkeeper was truly beyond Han Li's expectations. But what was particularly unusual was what happened when the young woman saw Madame Lan climb to the 6th floor. She continuously called out, "Auntie Lan! Auntie Lan!" with much intimacy. At the same time, she completely overlooked Han Li, causing him to feel sullen. "That's enough, Xianxia. There is a guest here." Although Madame Lan's words were harsh, her tone was filled with obvious affection. "Guest?" The young woman indifferently glanced at Han Li without the slightest of care. "Yes. This fellow Daoist Han wishes to buy pill formulas and the set of magic tools we previously acquired. Thus, I am bringing him to the 6th floor and having you receive him. I have to go back down. There may be more guests arriving at the 5th floor." Madame Lan spoke with great warmth. "So it's like that. But the next time Auntie Lan is free, she must definitely come up and keep me company." The young woman spoke with reluctance. Madame Lan gave a kind smile in response before heading back down. The young woman gazed at her as she descended. She eventually turned her head to glance at Han Li and spoke coldly. "What sort of pill formulas does your esteemed self want? We possess 8 pill formulas, but only 2 are useful to Foundation establishment cultivators. In addition, the prices for them are astonishingly high. It won't just cost several hundred spirit stones." When Han Li heard the tone of her voice, he smiled instead of becoming angry. "So long as the pill formulas are genuine, price is of no concern." Han Li's tone was exceptionally grand. The young woman was surprised by his response and earnestly sized him up. "Then please wait a moment. I will call for people to bring out the pill formulas and the set of magic tools." The young woman's expression softened. It was only natural that she acted more pleasantly around a magnanimous guest. She merely took out a small bell and lightly tapped it with a rhythm. Then, she casually sat in her chair without the slightest intention of entertaining Han Li. Han Li felt somewhat amazed at this. Still, he calmly pulled out a chair and sat across from the young woman. The only thing separating the two was a wooden table. Han Li's action caused the young woman's graceful brow to lightly crease. Although her expression wasn't very happy, she ultimately didn't say anything. A short moment later, a young female cultivator walked in, grasping 2 jade boxes, one large and one small. "Place them there." The young woman spoke indifferently as she pointed to the side of the table. "Yes, young madam." The female cultivator respectfully replied before placing the jade boxes down on the table. She then took the initiative to withdraw. Han Li's eyes flashed with surprise upon seeing the female cultivator speak so respectfully to a young female mortal. "The pill formulas and the magic tools are here. Your esteemed self should have a look. If they are to your satisfaction, then I will tell you the price." The young woman lightly pushed the jade boxes toward Han Li. Since she insisted, Han Li didn't act with the slightest politeness. He took the small jade box and opened the lid, revealing a red and white jade talisman. Han Li touched the 2 jade talismans and closed his eyes, slowly submerging his spiritual sense within them. When the young woman saw that Han Li was inspecting the pill formulas, she took out a thin, white book and started to read through it without the slightest of concern. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, Han Li withdrew his spiritual sense and wore an expression of contemplation. One of the formulas was similar to the qi gathering pill that Lei Wanhe had previously given him. It was useless to him. As for the other, it wasn't an ancient pill formula. It was for a pill called the True Essence pill. Apart from the required age of the ingredients used, it was rather easy to refine. It was very suitable for his use. However, the cost of this pill formula was unexpectedly several times greater than the qi gathering pill formula. Even Han Li understood the difference in value between ancient formulas and ordinary formulas that were currently used in the cultivation world. With that thought, Han Li returned the jade slips to their boxes with an indifferent expression. Then he took the larger box and opened it. The magic tools in the box caused Han Li to become stunned from a single glance. The jade box actually contained a set of 13 fine needles sparkling with red light. Each of the needles were only about an inch long, but their fire-red bodies emitted a fluctuating glow. Flying needle magic tools. Han Li couldn't help but mutter in astonishment. Even with Han Li's vast experience with magic tools, this was the first time he had seen flying needle magic tools such as these. He suddenly grew very excited. He previously hadn't seen anyone make full use of them either. When the young woman heard Han Li's murmurs, she couldn't help but turn her head to look at him with a trace of displeasure. She then continued to read the book without paying him any further attention. At that moment, Han Li was carefully examining one of the red needles as he held it in a pinch without paying any attention to the young woman's displeasure. Naturally, he was aware of her displeasure, but he wasn't about to accommodate her aloof, arrogant attitude. He was now staring at the needle with squinted eyes and a serious expression. Although Han Li hadn't seen any needle-type magic tools previously, he had heard many rumors with regards to the stealthy viciousness of flying needles. He had heard that while their offensive power was slightly inferior to ordinary magic tools, their bodies were small, and their flight was quick, thereby being the most suitable weapon to launch an ambush with. As such, many cultivators praised the flying needles to be a hidden weapon, causing flying needles to possess quite the reputation in the cultivation world. Naturally, there were many reasons as to why flying needle magic tools were so thin. Not only were they refined using peculiar materials, they were also several times more difficult to refine. Because of this, they were rarely seen in the cultivation world. In addition, users of flying needles would often only use them as a last resort since they were unwilling to allow others to know of their existence. This was why Han Li received such a shock when he saw a set of 13 such magic tools unexpectedly appear before him. "Young miss, does this set of flying needles have a name?" Han Li felt very pleasantly surprised, but his expression remained calm when he asked the young woman. When the young woman heard Han Li, she put down the book and indifferently said, "The red thread shadow chaser needles." "Good. I wish to acquire the True Essence pill along with the set of flying needles." Han Li spoke without the slightest hesitation. The young woman revealed a strange expression as she asked with disbelief, "Yi, you truly want that set of magic tools? What is it? Does this set of magic tools have some sort of defect, or is your esteemed pavilion unwilling to sell it?" Han Li raised his eyebrows in dissatisfaction. "Your esteemed self is mistaken. Although the red thread shadow chaser needles are extremely precious, our Stardust Pavilion does not wish to keep it. I merely ask this because there is something I must first tell you. This set of flying needles is substantially different from ordinary sets of magic tools. There is no origin controller, nor any child mother pieces. If you wish to activate them, you must simultaneously control all 13 needles. Otherwise, they would be useless." The young woman's eyes and tone were both ice cold. "I must simultaneously control them." Han Li came to a suddenly realization. It was no wonder that these rare flying needles had yet to be purchased. It held such a high requirement for one's spiritual sense. The young woman continued without the slightest of humor, "That's right. Originally, Aunt Lan and a few others fancied this set of magic tools, but because they were only able to control up to 9 needles, they have given up on it." "So, all 13 needles then?" Han Li chuckled before suddenly raising his hand, beckoning to the rest of the needles in the box. With a flash of red light, all of the flying needles simultaneously floated. The red needles quickly revolved around Han Li, transforming into 13 red threads that were difficult for the naked eye to see, creating a finely woven red net in an instant. The young woman's small mouth gaped, revealing an appearance of surprise to Han Li for the first time. Han Li soon waved his hand once more, returning the red threads to the jade box, which once again revealed their original appearance as needles. With an unchanged expression, Han Li asked with a deep voice, "Am I able to purchase these magic tools now?" "Since your esteemed self is able to use them, of course you can. Together with the true essence pill formula, it will come to a total of 4,000 spirit stones." The young woman regained her calm and once again spoke without the slightest humor. 4,000 spirit stones. Han Li looked at the young woman while rubbing his nose. That price had exceeded his expectations. The pill formula is 1,500 spirit stones. The flying needles are 2,500. The young woman listed the price without the slightest hesitation. To tell the truth, the woman didn't see the 4,000 spirit stones as overly expensive. After all, these items were rarely seen within the cultivation world. Were it not for the defeat of the 3 allied countries against the Devil Dao, they would have never sold such valuable items. At that moment, Han Li suddenly took a seat and assumed a solemn expression. "At what price does your esteemed pavilion purchase 1,000-year-old spiritual medicine?"